Hey guys, it's Michael. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome to a new video of the programming series. Today we have a very important topic that every athlete needs to know about, and that is how you decide whether you need to go with more weight in a certain exercise or if you need to add some reps. And that is what we will clarify in this video today. Bit of advertisement at the beginning. Once this video is published, my new book, Understanding Calisthenics, is already released. So if you see this video, make sure to get your copy, whether it's the English ebook or the printed German version, definitely get yours. And if you like the book, if you already had the chance to read a bit in it, then I would definitely love to see a review of yours. Having honest reviews of the customers that are happy with the book will definitely help our business, will spread the news about the book. So if you can support me with that, leave a review. I would be super thankful. And I'm hyped, of course, to hear your feedback, as this was, for me, one of the biggest projects I ever worked on. It's the first book that I ever wrote. So as you can imagine, I'm kind of excited. So yeah, let me know what you think. And if you wrote a review, thanks a lot for that. So let's discuss today's topic, and that is, should I do more reps or more weight? It is very crucial for every athlete when it comes to programming that you have a toolbox with different progression methods that you can use. And if you know when to use which progression method, then you can set up a pretty good plan already. So today we're gonna cover two of the most important progression methods, and that will be the rep progression and that will be the load progression. When we're talking about the rep progression, we are talking about adding reps to an exercise over time. And when we're talking about the load progression, we're talking about adding load to a certain exercise over time. And that's basically the two main progression methods that you are going to use within your training plan. We're going to cover three different aspects that will help you to decide whether the rep progression is your go-to progression or whether the load progression is superior for your individual case. The first aspect that helps you to decide if you're going to use rep or load progression is the goal. You need to think about it for every exercise individually. And yes, that takes some time, but that is what you need to do. If your goal is to become stronger, 1 rep max strength, then of course you need to add load over time, because that will bring you closer to your goal. If your goal is, just an example, to achieve a certain number of pull-ups, a certain number of dips, a certain number of muscle-ups with a special weight or just with your body weight, then you need a rep progression, because that will bring you closer to your goal and more specific than the load progression. So thinking about the goal for each exercise individually will help you a ton. Secondly, equipment. Do you have the equipment to load up an exercise, or do you don't have the equipment and you need to increase an overload with a rep progression? So equipment is a big factor. Then practicability, meaning basically, is the exercise easy to load? Is it comfortable? Can I really progressively overload it practically with more weight? Or is maybe a rep progression more practicable for me on the long run? So with these three aspects here, you can really make a pretty good decision on which variation or which progression you're gonna use. As you know me, I wouldn't leave you without a lot of different real-world examples. So the first thing we are going to cover is an example for the rep progression. So I just want to guide you through the thought process so that you saw it once, that you know how to set it up, and that you can use it for your own programming. Because theory is nice, but without practice, it doesn't give you shit. So we're going to take a look at a rep progression. So goal, as we already talked about, more reps. It's just that easy. If you want to do more reps, then you're going to go with a rep progression. And another thing is a load constraint. So when you have a certain exercise, you maybe don't want to add more and more and more and more and more weight because it's just not what you want to achieve with this exercise. So by just going with more reps, you want to keep the load constraint. You want to keep it low. Giving you an example, we can use a lateral raise, and you don't want to use a lot of weight with that because it gives you discomfort, it gives you pain, you made bad experience with it. So you rather level up the reps over time, even if that means doing 20, 25, 30 reps, because you want to keep that load constrained. Just an example where this could be important. Then equipment, so you can just have no weights available, which would be the most basic decision to go with a rep progression because you cannot load up the exercise, or you cannot load it in small steps. So if you, let's stick to the muscle up example here, if you just have 5 kg plates, you cannot really load up a muscle up reasonable because the weight jumps would just be much too big. So if you just have big plates, then often the rep progression is, at least on the short to midterm, the better decision to go with, because with just big plates, it's very hard to progressively overload. And practicability, maybe the exercise setup does not allow to be loaded, and the integration in your plan just might not make a lot of sense. Saying, maybe you don't want to work on a muscle up 1 rep max because you have an AMRAP competition upcoming. So 1 rep max strength integration in that program would not make a lot of sense. So it would not be very practicable, whatever, you know what I mean. So this could be a possible argumentation for deciding to go with a rep progression. But let's go with an example. We are taking a look at a rep progression that you could perhaps use for a muscle up. So maybe you want to compete one day and you want to create a solid foundation of muscle up repetitions. As you know, before loading up a calisthenics exercise, it can make sense to just have a bigger foundation of repetitions. So you have a lot of practice with that element. You already have a decent amount of control over that element, and you already have very resilient structures from practicing a lot. So in this step, for that particular athlete, a rep progression to level up his muscle ups to like 5-6 repetitions is the goal. And that is something you can do with a rep progression. We are going over a 4 weeks example, and we're using 3 sets of a muscle up. So week 1 could be first set 2 reps, second set 2 reps, third set 1 repetition. Week 2, we are leveling up the reps. We'll go with 3, 2, 2. Then next week, we're feeling good. We're going with 3, 3, 1, because that set, that was a bit heavy, so we couldn't make it to 3 repetitions here. Week 4, 3, 3, 3. We made the adaptation, we became stronger, and we could finish up with 3, 3, 3. Of course, it could also look like a 2, 2, 1. We could do 2, 2, 2. It could be 3, 2, 2. Everyone is different. The ability to add repetitions is different. So, you know, some can add a repetition to every set week by week in the beginning. Some can just add 1 set. Sometimes you will maybe lose a rep again. Totally normal. Don't panic here. In the end, you need to plan it in a way that over the course of a block, you increase the total number of repetitions that you are doing. Then you can go over to the second block. You want to start a bit lower, because if you are starting to train with that, which you barely could do after 4 weeks of the training, so 3, 3, 3, probably not the perfect form, very hard for you. You don't want to start with the peak, because then there will be no progression. If you start at the peak, what you gonna do? Hope for adaptation, and then maybe it comes, maybe not. That is not how you program. So what you're gonna do is you start again a bit lighter, work with good quality, and then it could look like this. You start pretty chill, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, and 4, 4, 3. And then you see maybe another block and you would achieve your goal of 5 muscle-ups repetitions. As I said, just a random example, but that is how you could set up a rep progression for a muscle-up. So now, the load progression, probably the one that you are going to use for most of the main lifts if you are an athlete in the field of weighted calisthenics as I am. If you're competitive, even more interesting because the load progression will be the thing that you will take care of most of the time, as our goal as competitive athletes is to become stronger with the 1 rep max. As we covered in the older videos, that is a specific skill that needs specific training. So the goal for our load progression here, why we're using the load progression, is we want to become stronger and we want to constrain our reps, because for us it's not practical, because an 8 RM has a lower carryover to our 1 rep max than a 3 RM. And how can we divide between them? With load. So instead of adding reps, we're adding load to keep the reps low, of course at the right point in time, as we covered in earlier videos. If you haven't seen them, check them out now so you have a basic understanding of how strength programming works. Equipment. It needs to allow for progressive overload long term. Load progression does not really work if you cannot load an exercise over a very, very long time. Saying difference between a pike push-up and an overhead press. The overhead press allows for progressive long-term overload. The pike push-up, like, you can load that up, but you will have a certain point in time where it's impossible to add more load. Once you're working with like a 40 kg pike push-up, what you're gonna do, adding even more plates or kettlebells, does not sound reasonable to me. Then for a long-term load progression, the overhead press in that example would be the superior exercise. Then practicability, it needs to be comfortable, safe, and specific. What I mean with comfortable and safe, pretty good example for that, back in the days before the back squat came into the game of weighted calisthenics, we work with a 1 rep max pistol squat. And that is very, very hard to progressively overload long term. And with long term, I mean over the course of years. It is not comfortable, it is not safe to do it with a lot of load. I think the best I hit was the pistol squat, like it was 4 years ago or something, with 55 kg. And yeah, I kind of fucked up my knees with that. So it's just not an exercise that works pretty good for 1 rep max strength, my opinion. And of course, we want to work specific. That is what we already covered. And setting up a load progression for a main lift in our example, that's dips, is actually pretty easy to do. I want you to look at the structure with block 1, block 2, block 3. Here on this side, we always have the start of the block. And here on this side, we always have the end of the block. In that example, we're starting block number 1, 3 sets, 5 repetitions, 30 kg additional weight. Then, within the course of a block, let it be in this example 4 weeks, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 5 weeks, 6 weeks, super individual. In our case, 4 weeks. And we're starting first week with 30 kg and we're adding plus 2.5 kg per week. Meaning we're ending up with a 3 times 5 with 37.5 kg. To make sure that we can add 2.5 kg, you need to make sure that you're starting light enough. If that is already RPE 10, no chance that you end up here. So for progressively overloading, you need to keep a buffer. Very, very important, because otherwise no chance that you can add plannable 2.5 kgs per week. Now here, let's say we arrived in week 4 with that load that was close to max effort. What we're gonna do? We want to increase the load again, but now we are achieving for 5 repetitions the max. If we go for more weeks with those 3 times 5, then we cannot add load every week. Because how? Like, we just can hope for adaptation, hope for getting stronger, but in the end we're just getting more and more fatigued, and we maybe experience a decrease in performance because we're working so heavy, so close to failure. So what we're gonna do is, for the next block, we taper down the repetitions. Because if I do 1 rep less, of course I'm able to use more weight. And that is the goal, load progression. We want to become stronger. So tapering down the repetitions is a very, very nice tool to keep our load progression up. So what we're gonna do is we decrease by 1 rep and we add 5 kg. That means we are arriving in block number 2 with 3 sets, 4 repetitions, and we're decreasing the weight again a bit because we want to keep some buffer, because from the start of the block to the end of the block, we want to increase every week by 2.5 kg. And to make that happen, as I said, we need some buffer. And that equals here, if we ended first block with 3.5 times 37.5 to 3 times 5 times 47.5 kg, an increment in your estimated 1 rep max of round about 1 kg. Sometimes, you know, depending on the body weight and so on, it might be a bit more, it might be a bit less, but roughly 1 kg, so you got stronger. And that is a process you can repeat. For block number 3, in that example, I just added a set to show you that if you taper down the reps too fast without adding a set at a certain point, you can have a very, very, very little workload. If you go back to the strength programming videos, the amount of practice we put in is very important. So 3 times 3 or a 3 times 1 at the end would be very, very little practice, which then maybe does not have the best carryover to our 1 rep max anymore. But you don't need to do that, of course, there's other methods. It's just in that example that I compensated for the loss of reps with an additional set. Good. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go a bit down here. So 1 rep down, and we will add 5 kg compared to the previous block. So 4 times 3, 40 kg. We're adding 2.5 kg a week, and we're arriving here again. That means another kg on our estimated 1 rep max. And that is a pretty easy way of setting up a load progression if we add load from week to week and we taper down the rep from block to block to be able to progressively overload with load on the long run. Pretty easy setup, works fantastic, and you can definitely use it in your own programming. And as you can imagine, there is definitely a middle way between a rep progression and a load progression, because there are a lot of use cases where you're somewhere in the middle. You want to somewhat increase the additional weight. You also want to increase the reps somehow. And that middle way is very, very easy to realize with the so-called double progression. Why is it called double progression? Because you first add reps and then you add load. 1, 2, so double a progression. And the goal is, or when do we use it? Whenever you want to keep a roughly constant rep range for a certain exercise, because you are having a goal within that rep range. Let's say hypertrophy, which is the most used case for this double progression. So you want to keep a moderate rep range of 8 to 10 reps, 6 to 8 reps. In our case, it's 10 to 12 repetitions, and you want to work for long term in that rep range because you have reasons for it. Equipment for the double progression needs to allow for progressive overload. That is very important. If you do not have the equipment to really add small increments of weight, the double progression will not work for you. And practicability, moderate ranges, and important, a weight progression is not possible from session to session. So, example, biceps curls. You're gonna have a very, very hard time adding weight for every session to your biceps curl. If you remember the dip progression, to be able to add weight on the long run, we needed to taper down the repetitions until we're ending up with a very, very low rep range. But we wanna grow our biceps. So we do not want to have like 1, 2, or 3 repetitions on a curl. It's maybe also not the safest way of executing curls on the long run. And yeah, it is not specific anymore for our goal. And the smaller the muscle group is, the less strength potential it has, the harder, of course, it also gets to add weight, because you could add like what? 0.1 kg every session, and that is just not realistic to load. So in that case, the double progression combines the best of both worlds. How do you set it up? So for our resistance exercise, the biceps curls, we start our first block with 3 times 10 at 10 kg. That's the starting point. And over the course of block number 1, we're just adding a couple of reps. So we're ending the block with 2 times 12 at 10 kg. Meaning if the block length is 4, we added every 2 weeks a repetition, which could be a reasonable progression. Maybe it's a bit different for you. Maybe you extend that rep range and you start with 10 and you end up with 14. Perfectly fine, would be possible if you were able to add that much amount of reps. Individual, just try and error. That is as easy as that. Then block number 2, we're taking this endpoint and we're adding load to it. And we're tapering down the reps again towards that. So instead of 3 times 12 at 10 kg, we're gonna go back to 3 times 10 at 12.5 kg. So here we're now adding weight, because we learned that we want to keep the rep range constant. We don't want to add more and more and more and more and more repetitions. That's why we're adding weight. And then we're proceeding exactly the same. We're starting with 3 times 10 at 12.5, adding repetitions. We're ending with 3 times 12 at 12.5 kg. We're going back to the original starting point, 3 times 10, and we're adding load. Then we're adding reps again. And this is something you can kind of do forever. At a certain period in time, you will maybe need to adjust that rep range a bit, because you know, you will achieve like a point of staleness where adaptation does not happen anymore because you're so used to that rep range that a bit of variation would be helpful. But that is something you can do like very, very long. And as you see here, that's like a course of 12 weeks. Easy, we leveled up from 3 times 10 at 10 kg to 3 times 12 at 15 kg within that short period of time. And that is also a realistic progression here. So whenever you need the rep range to stay constant because you're working mostly for hypertrophy reasons, then the double progression is your go-to method. And that's already it for today's video, where we cover different progression types and you hopefully learned how to use them and integrate them in your training program. If you have questions, let me know in the comments. If you want to hear about more programming topics, leave your ideas also in the comment section. I will see what I can do for you, and then see you in the next video.